Hello, welcome to Birth Words. This is episode number 63. In episode 63, we're going to continue talking about figured worlds and how they relate to birth. And specifically today, we'll be talking about forms of language, people, and objects that are part of figured worlds in birth.
Welcome to Birth Words. Words are powerful. What are you doing with yours? In this podcast, birth doula and applied linguistics scholar Sara invites you to be intentional, reflective, and empowering with your language as we come together to honor those who give birth. The work of Birth Words is to elevate the language surrounding pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum period. Nothing in this podcast should be taken as medical advice.
Welcome to the episode today. This is part 3 of a 4-part series. So if you haven't yet listened to episodes numbers 61 and 59, go back and listen to those now. They'll give you some context that you need for this episode. So in episode 59, I introduced the idea of figured worlds, which are basically the simplified mental pictures that we have of the way the world works. And we can have different figured worlds about elementary school classrooms or birth or eating at a restaurant. Any time you propose a specific social situation, the simplified version of what that typically looks like that pops into your head is called a figured world. This tool, as I talked about in episode 59, comes from a linguist and educator named James Paul G. From his book, How to Do Discourse Analysis. And I know I'm kind of throwing a lot of terms out at the beginning of this episode. Discourse analysis is the analysis of language in use. And discourse is another thing that I've talked about in previous episodes. I give an introduction to it in episode 4, so that's another one for you to check out if you want to learn more about discourse or language in use. And if you want to learn even more about it, if you are a birth worker, this is one of the things that we go into quite in depth in the in-depth workshop for birth workers that's available online and in person. The next class is in March. And you can look for more information about how to sign up for those at birthwords.com/classes. But in those classes, we really go into a lot more depth about what does this word discourse mean, language in use, why does it matter, and how does it apply to the birth space and the clients that I'm supporting, and how does it sometimes lead to mismatch or misunderstandings between care providers and clients. Lots and lots of layers of complexity can be uncovered on this topic. So if you're interested in learning more, I'd point you towards those resources. But for today, let's dive into this episode. Again, I do encourage you to listen to episode 59 and 61 to get some background for where we're going with this one. Because in episode 59, I described what a figured world is. In episode 61, we talked about 3 specific applications of figured worlds, specifically different facets of figured worlds. And those were participants, activities, and ways of interacting during birth. So again, I know that I'm being really conceptual with these things, and I want to not be abstract. I want to be concrete and give examples of what they look like. So James Paul G talks about figured worlds and, again, this imagined world, this simplified picture in our minds of how things operate. And he says that there are 9 components or facets that make up this figured world. Participants, activities, and ways of interacting we talked about in episode 61. Today we're going to talk about forms of language, people, and objects. So today we're going to think about figured worlds and the forms of language, the people, and the objects that exist in these figured worlds. And of course, we'll be talking about birth.